The last two stories didn't record right because I ran out of phone space. But now it's Sunday, so it's my story.
Oh, your story.
Yep, and I'm going to tell you the story about Elvie and the Siege and Jespite going to Kronos Tower.
Wait, what about part 3 of Stormtroopers?
Oh, there is that as well.
Part 3.
You guys want part three of Stormtrooper's life? Oh, okay, we'll do that.
I think it was part 4.
No, 3. Part 1 took us from the recruiting school all the way to the escape of that pirate ship. And then part 2 took us from the escape of the pirate ship from the planet Tatooine all the way to the escape of the pirate ship from the battle station called the Death Star. And now we're on, that was part 2, and then now we're on part 3.
Alright. Yeah.
Yeah. So T-135 and T-140 reported back to Darth Vader. And all the other stormtroopers were kind of like talking amongst themselves, like, why are T-135 and 140 circumventing all the officers and going directly to Darth Vader? It didn't make any sense. And they were kind of like wondering what's going on. But T-135 and T-140 were just very glad because they were like privates and they were going all the way past lieutenants and colonels and sergeants all the way to the top, even past the generals, to Lord Vader. And they felt very special. And Darth Vader said, did you put the beacon, make sure that the Millennium Falcon got away with the beacon? And they said, yes. While you were battling Obi-Wan Kenobi, the farm boys shot the controls and closed the door so you couldn't see what was going on. But we made sure. And we did lose some casualties. We lost some of our friends. And Lord Vader said, it's an acceptable loss because the Empire will soon be secure from these terrorists and pirates. And so the pirate ship sped off, and the T-135 and T-140 went up against the wall to guard the room, and just then Grand Moff Tarkin came in, and he said, I'm taking a grave risk, Vader. This had better work. And Darth Vader said, it will, Grand Moff Tarkin. And then, after a while, one of the Star Destroyers reported back, we tracked the pirate ship to a moon on Yavin 4, Yavin, moon number 4 on the planet Yavin. It's called Yavin 4. And Lord Vader said, there's an old Jedi temple there. I should have known. Excellent. Set course for Yavin 4. But do not bring the fleet out too close to Yavin 4, or we will alert the rebels. Instead, bring the Death Star on the other side of Yavin so they cannot detect us. And then we will slowly creep around the planet and destroy the whole moon. Excellent, said Grand Moff Tarkin. Great plan, Lord Vader. And so the Death Star went into hyperspace, I think. I can't remember how that worked. But anyway, it did. And it was zooming across the galaxy. And a few minutes later, they came out on the other side of Yavin. They came out of hyperspace. And Lord Vader said to T-135 and T-140, how are your pilot training skills? And both of them stood at attention and said, excellent, sir. I graduated top of my class. And T-140 said, yes. I was also top of my own class. Vader said, excellent. Go change into the black Stormtrooper pilot costume, armor. And so they left to go change. And just then, a different Stormtrooper came up and said, Vader, the rebels are approaching. And he said, fire upon all their frigates. And the guy said, they don't have any large vessels, sir. It's all one-man fighters. What? He said, what trickery is this? And then he said, keep all the battle stations ready and be on the lookout for the large rebel destroyers. As for the fighters, just shoot them out of the sky. Yes, sir. And so Lord Vader went to the war room to look at the results. And so all the fighters came, and they were these things called X-Wing fighters and Y-Wing fighters. And they were made by a different company that sold them to the rebels. A little bit of Blinky. And they came to the Death Star, and everybody wondered where was the attack coming from, because it couldn't possibly be one-man fighters against the Death Star. So they were just shooting at them. And the X-Wings would shoot back on occasion. But they all seemed to go towards the polar trench. There was a trench that went over the top of the Death Star. There was another one that went around the side of it. And they would go in the polar trench, and they would go across the top of the Death Star. And they told Lord Vader, and he said, they're probably trying to fire from the guns, but they don't understand that there are guns inside the trench. Just keep firing upon them. And so a few Y-Wings went down the trench, and when they got to the end of the trench, they would shoot torpedoes down a ventilation shaft. And everybody was wondering, like, why are they shooting torpedoes into the air conditioner? What's it going to possibly do? And they kept shooting. But then, all of a sudden, one of the engineers came running up and said, Lord Vader, we've discovered a possible vulnerability. And he said, what? And they said, we were going over the schematics. This air conditioner vent goes all the way down to the core of the Death Star. That's impossible, said Lord Vader. It's merely for ventilation. It can't go all the way to the core. They said, well, it's not a typical core ventilation shaft. It's a really small one. And it goes right to the detonator of the Death Star. And it may be a vulnerability. And then Lord Vader said, get all the TIE fighters and blow all those ships out of the sky. Where are those rebel fleet? And the rebel fleet hadn't shown up. Grand Moff Tarkin said, we're moving into position. We'll be in position in 15 minutes. And Vader said, get my ship ready. And they said, yes. And T-135 and T-140 reported, and they were dressed in their black Stormtrooper pilot armor. And he said, follow me. And so the three of them went marching down the hall. And T-135 looked at T-140 and was like, awesome. And T-140 said, shh, be quiet. And they marched down the hallway, and all those white Stormtroopers would stand at attention and salute as they walked by, and they were so happy that they were the awesomest in the world. Stormtrooper guys right now. And they followed Darth Vader to the launch site, where there were tons of X-Wing fighters, or tons of TIE fighters. And they got into some TIE fighters, and there they saw Darth Vader's TIE fighter. And it was specially made just for him. It looked like some of the very old Jedi fighters, but it still had TIE fighter technology in it. What's so funny?
This reminds me of, I think, I don't know, but I think it was funny moments of Star Wars where Darth Vader, not Star Wars, blew up his own Death Star.
That's funny. Okay.
It wasn't Star Wars?
It wasn't in Star Wars? Okay. So, and then they took off, Darth Vader and the two pilots. And a lot of the TIE fighters had blown up some of the X-Wings. And so it was Darth Vader was personally going to take out the rest of them. He was actually the best pilot in the Empire. And he proved his point. He went after them through the trench, and he blew up an X-Wing. And then he went another round and blew up a Y-wing. And there was only a Y-wing and 2 X-wings left of the whole fleet. And so he said, let's take care of these last rebels and be done with it. This was the attack. They were trying to torpedo all the way to the core of the Death Star. And the pilot said, wow, we didn't even know that could be possible. We'll have to fix that. And so they followed Darth Vader in formation as they flew into the trench. And there was one last guy, because the other ones had tried to shoot their torpedoes and they missed, and there was no more torpedoes. And as soon as they didn't have any torpedoes, they flew away from the Death Star to get clear of it. And there was just one pilot left, and Darth Vader was like, I sense something very strange about this pilot. The Force is strong with him. But no matter, we will take him out. And they started shooting. And they almost shot him, but instead they just hit the astromech droid that was co-piloting the ship. And they kept on going down the meridian. And he said, make sure to take aim and fire on my command. And right then, all of a sudden, T-135's TIE fighter just blew up right next to Vader. He said, what? And the T-140 said, what happened to my friend? And then he crashed into the wall and went spinning out and hit Darth Vader right on the shield. And Darth Vader's plane TIE fighter went spinning out of control into the space. And he was like, what's happening? And just then, out of the corner of his eye, as he was spinning around, he saw that pirate ship. And T-130 and T-135 and T-140 had ejected right before their TIE fighters blew up, and they were standing on the trench. And T-135 said, I hope this thing doesn't blow up. And T-140 said, if it does, we need to get into a bomb-proof shelter room right now. And T-135 said, let's go. And they ran across the outside of the Death Star. They were kind of jumping because the gravity was a little lower on the outside. And they found an access hatch right in the middle of the trench, and they got inside it, and they were inside some of the guts of the Death Star. And T-135 said, just a minute, and he went to a terminal and typed up a bunch of numbers, and it showed a path to the nearest bomb shelter. And T-140 said, let's get in it. And they ran down the hall, and there was like sirens going everywhere. Wow, wow, wow. T-135 and T-140 ran down the hall, and they found the bomb shelter, opened up the door, and got inside. And they closed it up, and then they pushed a button, and these huge doors shut all over. They just waited there. And then they heard the most enormous explosion they've ever heard. And they were violently thrown around in the bomb shelter. And they went sailing out into space. And they could see through the bomb-proof window that they were hurling through space. And they looked, and the Death Star had been blown into 1,000,000 bits. The end.
Well, at least the Stormtroopers and Darth Vader were okay. I thought